I love moment makers. I love people that take these moments that we're given, that we don't deserve and you didn't earn them, but they're a gift to you. And they take them and they make the most of them. They recognize it, they create it. When I was just a little boy growing up, a military family, my mom and dad, great parents, they used to take us to this lake house in Shell Lake, Wisconsin, on the northwest corner. And it's just a place that my dad used to visit when he was a little kid. And when I was about 10 years old, he was going to initiate me into a club that he created as a boy called the FHA. And the FHA was a boys' club that used the old ice house. This was an old cottage, and it had been converted into a boys' cabin with 2 bunk beds and concrete floors and throw rugs and model ships that boys had built and swords that were made from the wood that was at the camp. And we used to sleep out there, and that was a special moment. And he said, when you get to the right age, I'll be able to induct you into the FHA. So this summer was the summer it was all going to happen. Summer of 1985, I was at the lake house, and my dad told me that this was the week that I was going to be inducted. He said, now you have to do a few things. There's a few qualifications to be a member of our club. I said, tell me what they are. He said, first, every time you address any woman at the lake, you have to refer to her as, "Oh, gracious lady of the lake." My sister, who's 3 years older than me, who's sitting in the back of the room, as a 10-year-old boy, that was pure torture. And I think she loved every moment of that. He said I had to walk out into the woods by myself at midnight to take a leak. He said that any time that he said the words 10,000 aardvarks, I had to do 10 push-ups. Now, what did all that mean? It sounds like nothing, but for me in that moment, I was eating it up. As a 10-year-old boy, I was so excited, and then this one night towards the end of our vacation, he shows up to the door with my uncle, and they summon me to the FHA cabin. And we walk out, and they're making a big deal of it. You know, it's a big ceremony. And they sit me down at this table, and they explain to me what the FHA is all about. They explain to me who the Vromans are, what we stand for, what our values are, and how to live our lives. I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget the temperature in the air. I'll never forget the words that was spoken. I remember exactly where I was sitting. Most importantly, I remember how I felt. And I think it's moments like that in our lives that shape our identity. I think that we all have moments that are wonderful and highlights, and we have moments that are tragic and that we suffer. And yet we get to give them great meaning, and we get to grow through those moments. In the Front Row Foundation, we're moment makers. We take people who are fighting for their lives, and we help create a moment that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. And then we want to create a community, a supportive community where we can teach the skills, the mindset, the relationship building skills, how to shape our environment and our cultures so that we can all be moment makers, not only for ourselves, but for all those around us. The Front Row Foundation began when I was having a moment at a Jason Mraz concert. And I was in the very, very back row of the show. And I looked down to the front, and I remember seeing this group of people in the front, and they were standing up and dancing and shouting out requests, and Jason was engaging with them. I remember looking in the back, and I remember looking around where I was sitting in the back, and I saw people that looked like they wanted to be anywhere other than there. And the front row looked like they wanted to be there and nowhere else. I remember thinking to myself, same moment, drastically different experience. And isn't it interesting that all of us can be in a room like this, and we can all have the same moment occurring, and yet take 2 or 3 or 100 million different variations of that experience away with us because of how we choose to see it oftentimes. We can choose to live our lives as spectators in the back, checked out, or we can step up into the front row of our lives. And we always say that it's not what seat you get, it's whether or not you choose to have a front row experience. Because see, you could be front row if that's your front row, if that's your best seat in the house. The Front Row Foundation began because we wanted to help people to experience the best of all their moments. Today, we're fortunate enough to be able to look back on more than 100 experiences that we've created. And we're able to see some patterns, things that we can notice now that we could have never noticed before. When you look back on something, you can sometimes see the patterns and connect some dots a little easier. And when we sat down to write the Front Row Factor book 2 years ago, it hit me that you can learn a lot about living life from people who are fighting for it. And one of the reasons that we can do that is because, listen, we all in this room have a life-threatening illness. It's called being human. We all share the same destiny, that this ride ends for every single person here. Now, I don't know about advancing technologies, but my guess is that 150 years from now, not a single person that's here today will be at the future Best Year Ever blueprints. These are our moments. It's in the fact that time is finite that allows us to appreciate more of our moments now. See, when I think of death, it doesn't terrify me. It excites me and reminds me that these moments count. I remember sitting down on an airplane one time on my way to give a keynote speech, and I opened up my journal, and I wrote a little dot on the left-hand side of the page, and it said birth. On the other side of the page, I put another dot, and it said death. And I said, let's just imagine that I live to be 100, and let's say 80 of those years are amazing years where I can do anything I want. Where am I now? And I put that dot at about age 37. And what I could see in front of me is that if things went according to plan, I was about halfway through. I thought about my children. I have 2 boys, an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, beautiful wife who's here, but unfortunately not feeling well, so she's upstairs healing herself. I thought about my family, and I thought about, the fact that when a child is born, that you get 936 Saturdays until they're 18 and maybe leave the house. 936. I have an 8-year-old, and I think sometimes I'm like, he's halfway to driving a car. How many summers do I have left with my son? How many summers do I have to experience? I remember saying to my buddy John Kane at the beginning of one summer, I was like, we have 16 weekends of this summer. And how are we going to create and build in those weekends? It's knowing that the time is finite that sometimes brings it to life. How important are your moments? John Berghoff talked about time and that you'll never be able to get that back. These moments, this time that we have together, it's what we make of it. Where are we going with all this Front Row Foundation stuff? What does Front Row Living mean in the future? Imagine a world of people who are present and aware of what's happening in each moment and lifting other people up. See, oftentimes we talk about getting in the game. There's this, this philosophy of like, I don't want to be on the sidelines of life. I want to be in the game. I totally get it. I like to play the game too. But we underestimate the power of showing up for people. We underestimate the power of being in someone's front row and lifting them up, putting somebody else on the stage. People often ask me why I like to speak. And I say, well, I love to share, but it's mostly because I love to be in the audience. I fell in love with speaking, being a listener of great speakers. We can live our lives in a way of showing up for people, making other people the rock star. And when you're a great fan, you get a better show. You know that? The best fans get the best show. So you are a participant. You are playing the game of life when you put others in the spotlight. That's a philosophy that we want to perpetuate in the world where we can lift one another up, lift up each moment, lift up each person, and show up for people. I love showing up to a room like this and imagining that one of the best friends of my life could be in this room, and I've yet to meet them yet. I love thinking that the person to my left or my right might have been put there for a reason, and I don't quite know what it is just yet. But if I listen deeply, if I include people in my life, that I can make the most of all my moments. I imagine a life one day where this is how we normally take pictures. And then when somebody says, let's do one old school, they just go like this. I imagine a life where at every live performance around the world, there are seats reserved for Front Row Foundation. And that backstage, the celebrities and the athletes or the rock stars or the performers will say, who's in our front row tonight from Front Row Foundation? It's just a cultural, acceptable norm. I want to talk about how this all applies to you. I want to talk about how this applies to your best life ever. And for those that you love, helping them have their best life ever, their best year ever. Because if you want to have your best year ever, you've got to help all your friends have their best year ever. That's part of the deal. So here's what we learned. There are 3 forces at work in creating the most of every moment. One is the power and understanding the power of hope. Hope. Hope is about bringing the power of future moments into this one. Hope is the power of bringing future moments into this one. And hope is very different than wishful thinking. See, wishful thinking says, I wish things were different. Hope says, I make the difference. I've seen hope play out in so many amazing ways. One of our recipients, Thomas K., avid rugby player, picture of health. And just like this, he's fighting for his life. In a wheelchair, losing his eyesight. He lives in Canada. Our Canadian team comes to us and says, this young man, Thomas K., we really want to send him to a rugby match. We want to send him to the World Cup in New Zealand. So we go out and we raise the money and we create this event and we unveil the tickets and we have all this on film. And when Thomas finds out he's going to be going to see the Rugby World Cup, we hear back from his family that every single day in physical therapy, he's fighting to stand so that he can do that for the national anthem at the event. When we have a dream, when we have hope, it affects now. Hope brings the power of future moments into this one. So during this event, you're going to have the opportunity to dream and to reclaim the hope that you have for your life. And you're also able to ask other people, what dreams make you come alive? What are you hopeful for, right? What moments in the future are you trying to bring into focus and into life? We also learned about the power of celebration. And the power of celebration is bringing the past moments into the present. Celebration is bringing the power of past moments into the present. Now, what's interesting is you can celebrate what just happened because as soon as we recognize that something happened, it is now in the past, right? The second we realize it. So we can celebrate what seems to be in the present, but it's truly now in the past because it has already occurred. So celebration can be anniversaries and birthdays, and we celebrate in Front Row Foundation. One of the things that makes us very unique and different from all the other wish organizations is we celebrate people's anniversaries every single year. We celebrate anniversaries every single year. How do you celebrate your successes and others? We all celebrate differently, and our celebrations mean different things to different people. Carrie Smolensky, who's in the back of the room right there, has been part of Front Row Foundation since day one. He's been a board member, he's raised money, he's created these experiences. And one of the events that Carrie helped create was for Rockstar Mike. And Rockstar Mike was this 16-year-old with just a long list of medical challenges. Mentally, he was developed to about the age of 9. And he was a big fan of pirates, so we created a pirate's voyage for him. And we sent him to Myrtle Beach, and it was the first time he was on an airplane, and the first time he saw the ocean, and the first time he was in a hotel, and the first time in a limousine, and there were all these firsts. And he was so happy. It was such a great moment for Mike and his family, and Carrie was the creator of this event. And I remember you telling me you downloaded Pirates of the Caribbean on your computer and your iPad. You had it ready for him on the plane, and all these little nuances and touches that Carrie brought to the event. Mike was really sick at the time, and when he got back, he almost immediately went into the hospital. And he was in his final days. Carrie, you did what you always do, and that's show up. And Carrie went to the hospital, didn't have to, it wasn't part of the deal. And he went and he saw Mike. And I remember him telling me, he said, man, I walked in, and Mike's hooked up to all these tubes, and he's just fighting for his life. But he was sitting there, he had his photo book from our event. Everybody gets a photo book, and he's flipping through it, and he's smiling, and he's reliving that. Because when we're in tough moments in our lives, sometimes it's good to go back and to pull from the strength of your past, of your highlight moments. That's the power of celebration. That's the power when we lift up the moment. You got the future, and you've got the past, and then you've got now. And so the third force is the present moment. And the third force is what you do with right now, what's right in front of you. The people that are right next to you. The speakers that are right now with you. The things you're hearing, the things you're experiencing. It's being mindful to the moment. Presence isn't always pretty. I want to add. Presence doesn't always mean it's pretty. Sometimes, you talk about the front row, and it sounds great, but sometimes I don't even want to be in the front row. Sometimes, because it's hard, right? It's like, well, what do I have to pee? And I'm right here, and John's talking. Like, that's hard. And you're back there. It's easy, right? My friend Chris Hunt, who's right here in the front row, he has a friend that travels and sees U2 concerts, and he was showing me video yesterday, and he said it's a whole process to get to the front row. Like, you have to get there a day early, and then there's like a whole system of like, and it's incredible because once you're there, by the way, it's like you can't leave your spot to go, right? Like you're locked in for what seems to be 8 hours, 10 hours, right? And you just think, how do you even do that? And that's what I mean, like the presence and front row living, it's not always pretty. Getting the seats isn't easy. Getting to your seats isn't easy. Getting away, it's not easy to live a front row life. That's not the point. We're not looking for easy, we're looking for meaningful. We're not looking for easy, we're looking for meaningful. Presence is about amplifying the moment to serve you and others. Presence is about noticing the good so you can silence what's not. Presence is where your life is built and experienced. When we eat our food, do we truly taste it? When somebody shares a word, do we truly hear it? Do we take a moment to experience and be grateful for the things that we have access to? Hope, celebration, and presence. 3 amazingly powerful forces at work. How do you take hope, celebration, and presence and put it into practice? I think about lifting up the moment and lifting up people. So I use the acronym LIFT as a way to remind myself of how to be a moment maker. And here's what that means. The L is for listening deeply. Moment makers listen first. It's like when we do a front row event, and in the back of the room, we have Bex Herzog. If you haven't met Bex, now she won't be able to talk to you because she lost her voice yesterday, but she will smile and say hello and give you a hug. She is our director of events. So she is the person in charge of creating all of our front row experiences. And Bex, you did a fantastic job with Hal's event. Can we give Bex a round of applause back there? Fantastic. And, Bex is a moment maker. But when we go to create an event for people, we, first of all, find out their favorites. So we get a list of all the things that matter to them so that we can shape an event that creates the experience they most want to have. One of the greatest gifts you give to people, one of the best moments that you can create at any time is to be a good listener. Your gift is not in what you say. It's not in the wisdom that always comes out of your mouth. It's in the compassionate eyes that you set on someone's soul where they can share their dreams and their fears and their loves with you in a person that's engaged in that conversation. I think about Andrew Smallwood being one of the best listeners that I've ever met in my life. And if you don't know Andrew, you have to meet Andrew. He's part of our Front Row Foundation team, and he handles a lot of our communication and fundraising, and he was the former chairman of our board. Andrew listens, and he asks questions, and he's attentive. But when you do that, when you listen deeply, you know what moment to create. You know what's needed next. The second part of the formula is to include others. The I of lift is to include others. A moment is great, but it's even better when you bring other people in. You're going to hear from Jeff Kaler, and part of Jeff's framework of how to be a moment maker in his world is what he calls conspiracy theory. And I don't want to give away his message, but the idea of, with magic tricks and illusions, that sometimes what amplifies the moment is by bringing somebody else into it so they're in on the joke. When we include people, we amplify the moment. Because we included Dana White in the experience, it amplified the moment. For how? How do we include other people in our moments and experiences of life? If we just have the mindset of I'm inclusive, like when you go to lunch here, do you include other people? If you sense or see that somebody is without a lunch partner, do you include them in? Are you an inclusive person? Marketing, by the way, as Joe Polish talked about it yesterday at Entrepreneur Day, is like when you believe in something, you want to tell everybody about it. It's like an obligation that you have. Marketing is inclusion. Marketing says, I've got something that I love, and I want people to feel included in that thing. I used to think marketing was kind of icky, right? It was like, look how great I am. Everybody, look how wonderful I am. Look how awesome this thing is that I've got. And I just now think of marketing as including other people in what I believe in. Including others. The F is for the front row moment. The F is for the actual moment, the pinnacle moment, the experience you've created. When it all goes down, that's the front row moment. So you've listened, you've included people, and then you create the peak experience, whatever that might be. Sometimes that peak experience is so natural, it's Ursula sharing with Hal what he means to her and to the family. She didn't write that speech. She wasn't up the night before scripting the words. That was from her heart and in the moment. And we all agreed that was our highlight moment of the whole experience, was hearing those words. That's the pinnacle. That's the present. And then the T is for thanks and celebration. Just like Brother James sings in Grateful, it's all about giving thanks. And you'll hear this word come up over and over and over again. It's being grateful for what you have and the people in your life. And, it's recognizing that where you are, as Hal says, is exactly where you're supposed to be, to learn the thing you need to learn, to meet the person you need to meet in order to go to where you are supposed to be next. There is no accident there. You're here for a reason, and it's the reason that you determine. Thanks and celebration is like we're walking out from meeting Dana White, and Dana's involved in this conversation, and Hal and I are like, let's not interrupt, right? Let's just go back, and we'll see the next fight. And then Ursula's like, no, we have to say thank you to Dana White. And when Ursula says something, you listen. And anybody that knows Ursula, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Polish ambassador. All right, so here's what happens, ready? Ursula says, we have to say thank you to Dana White. We're like, of course. So we go and we wait obediently. And we wait. Dana comes out, and then we say thank you. And in that moment was the hey, why don't you come back to another fight and sit with me at the broadcasting table next to the cage? And by the way, the only other person I've ever seen sit at that table is like Sylvester Stallone. So now it's Sly and Hal. Those are the two people that have ever sat at that table. But what's great is that that moment was amplified because of thanks and celebration. Because Ursula took that moment to say thank you. Where's John Israel? Where's John Israel? Mr. Thank You. So many moments have come because of writing 5 thank you cards a day for 365 days without fail, landed him on TV with a whole new mission in life because he takes moments to say thanks and celebrate people and celebrate experiences. I love you. Lift up the moment, lift up people. That's what this is all about. I told you I have 2 boys, 8 and 3. My 8-year-old is Tiger. My 3-year-old boy is Ocean. Those are their real names, in case you're wondering. I'll tell my boys, your names were picked from a place of power. Not from a place of fear, of judgment, thinking that people might pick on you or judge you. Your names were picked from a place of power. That was a tough moment. I remember even thinking about their names. My wife and I were like, what should we name them? And I said, let's just go through names. And when we both say, hell yeah, let's pay attention to that. And we said, Ocean. And she goes, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And then we were like, really? Not so sure about that. That was fear, right? My boys. Tiger, when he was just 4, and we were living in New Jersey, we were at this local fair that they had pop-up, fair event in the community, and they had put up this rock wall that was about 40 feet tall that you could pay $7 and climb, and we were walking through, and my little 4-year-old Tiger looks at me and he says, Papa, I want to climb that wall. And I remember thinking in my heart, I was like, he's way too young for that wall. There's no way. So I tried to encourage him to go do something I knew he could do. But he was persistent. And if you know Tiger, he's very persistent. And Tiger, Ursula's laughing. And he won. I finally was like, yeah, buddy, let's give it a shot. And we go to the wall, and the guy harnesses him up, and he gets on the wall, and I'm like, this is going to be over in a second, right? Because this is like a big kid activity. My son shoots 35 feet up on this wall. I'm blown away. And there he is at the top of the wall, almost, but the wall inverts out. It's like the expert part of the wall. It's a negative, right? And he gets there, and he looks down to me, and he's stuck, and he looks down, and he says, Papa, I can't. I'm like, what's the right thing to say as a dad? It's the right thing to say. It's okay, buddy. You tried. I was like, yeah, that's good. Really good. I'm a great dad. And he starts to let go when the guy who harnessed him up, who's working the rock wall, he looks over at me and he goes, hey, I think your boy can do it. He looks back up at my son and he says, hey, little man, try again. Brilliant. Brilliant. My little boy, with the newfound hope given to him by the stranger at the rock wall, grabs a hold of the wall, and with all of his strength and total focus and determination, makes it to the top. Smashes the button, lights go off, everybody's celebrating. He comes back down the wall, and everybody's cheering and clapping, and he walks over to me, and I high-fived him, and I was gonna say, I knew you could do it, but I didn't. I was just like, you rock. And we're celebrating him, and this guy next to me is like, man, that's your boy, you must be so proud. And I was like, yeah, and we get to talking, and he says, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a motivational speaker. Sure. Not a very good one, apparently. So, this guy can be a moment maker, and he's just working the rock wall, right? He's a stranger working the rock wall, and he's a moment maker for my son. Now, I can't tell you what role that moment has played in my son's life, but what I can tell you is this. Right now, my son is on the elite rock climbing team in Austin, Texas. And I believe in my heart that that man, that stranger, played a role in encouraging my son and believing in himself and trying again, which is one of the greatest lessons that we can teach. Now, why is it that my own flesh and blood, my own son, somebody that I swore I would never do that to, I would always believe in, why is that? And then it hit me. We often treat people as we remember them, not as who they've become or who they could become. We also treat our moments like they were, but not like they could be. Not like their potential. We don't fulfill their destiny, these moments that we get to choose, we get to participate, we get to be the artists with, and to paint on the world different experiences with the moments because of how we listen and how we engage and interact. Because of how we lift people up, because of how we show up in the front row. When we do that nodding, as speakers, we love that. We love hearing, that's good, yeah. When you look out in the crowd and you see somebody and they're like, yeah, I love that. Brother James, you're really good at that, you know? That's like one of the greatest gifts. What would our lives look like? What would our friends and family lives look like if we treated everybody as they could be? What's possible? My wife, Tatiana, she's awesome. I hope you meet her tonight. If you do meet her, just know that she's a little under the weather. She definitely wants to be here, but I told her rest. Take care of yourself. I learned that from Hal, this idea of taking a moment to take care of ourselves. Being in the front row doesn't mean you're always there, because oftentimes it's not being in the front row that makes you appreciate that moment. All of our moments don't have to be front row moments. In fact, I would say that they're not going to be front row moments. But that's what makes them great moments, is that we're not always going to be present, we're not always going to be hopeful, and we're not always going to be in celebration. My wife is really a powerful and special person. And in the book, on page 138, I wrote that when we lift people up, we can do that with our words and our acknowledgments. I showed up one morning to our kitchen, and on our chalkboard wall, our door, where we write notes to each other and whatnot, she had written a note the night before, and I was already sleeping. So when I got down to the kitchen, I looked at the wall, and on it was these words. Dear Jon, have I told you lately that I believe in you? I do. You're the most beautiful human I've ever met. You, Jon, are talented and driven, and there is fire in you that is hot and good, a powerful combination. It's a real honor for me to watch you grow. You've already made such a difference on this planet, and you're only 40. So much to come. Just look at you, and I see light, greatness, wisdom, charm, focus, and motivation. I love you, Tatiana. I think about that note. Took her maybe a couple of minutes to write. And then I wrote it in a book that will live on forever. And my children will read that. And there are people in this room that have reached out to me and said their favorite part of the whole book was that page. Ali, are you here, by the way? Thank you for that. And I agree that that's a very powerful part of the book, and what I encourage all of you to do is to think about the words that you speak today in your wisdom circles or in your communications with people, and your encouraging words, how you listen to people and how you express the best of what is in every moment. If you want to live an amazing life, you just string together as many amazing years as possible, your best year ever, all the time. If you want to have your best year ever, you need 12 great months. And a great month is 30 days, which are made up of hours. Hours are minutes, and minutes are moments. Each moment at a time, your life story and the story of those around you is being written. We always say that you don't always choose your seat in life, but you do always choose to have a front row experience in life. And if you don't like your seat, change it. But if you can't change it, own it. Rock it. Make the most of it. Take all that you can from that moment. As it's been said and talked about countless times, and you'll hear Jon and Hal talk about this, is that you're all moment makers. It's not Jon and Hal's job to make this event great. It's our job collectively as a community. They alone can't do that. They need you, and we all need each other. And this is a small example of what happens around the world. If we want to change the world, we have to see the world as that this is our backyard. This is our community that we take care of. And if everybody takes care of everybody, then life is good. So guys, I encourage you to get out there and be moment makers. And remember that micro moments lead to mega movements. Love you guys. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. Hold on. Oh. Can we do a picture with everybody? Can we do it right here? Can we do this?
To the people, places, things, helping me believe in a dream that I see within me. You wanna know what I think? Take a deep breath.